Tony D and Little Joan asleep in the sunbeam, and this is a screenwriter's tips by request. Um, well, I'm making two videos. One's definitely by request, and one's sort of not. So this is the first one, and it's a little harsh, but why screenwriting is basically almost not a job. Okay, smash a like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys books 1 through 17. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. So why is screenwriting almost not a job? Well, the problem with it is it's really not recognized as much of a skill in the industry. And this has been a huge problem. William Goldman, the famous one, the patron saint of screenwriting, famously talked about it, and he was towards the end kind of disgusted with the industry and the entire enterprise. And I think I know why. The reason is, and I've said this before, if you go onto a movie set and you tell the director what to do as a screenwriter or anybody else, you will get told, hey, you don't tell the director what to do, shut up. If you go onto a set and tell the cinematographer what to do, or the cameraman, or the lighting guys, you will get yelled at. You don't know what you're doing. Why are you doing this? Even if you go to the craft service people and tell them, hey, I got an idea for a sandwich, they'll probably tell you, get out of my face. This is my job. Unfortunately, when it comes to screenwriting, almost all those people I mentioned feel free to come up to you and say, hey, I got an idea for a scene. Here it is. And if you turn around to them and say, what the hell are you doing? You don't have a right to pitch me ideas. Get the F out of my face. In a lot of cases, especially in a low budget case, people will react, oh my God, what is wrong with you? You're not really a team player. And this is the problem with screenwriting as a job. If you look at the credits of movies, very often the writing credit goes to the director and the screenwriter. Now, who did the work in there? I would argue a lot of times it was the screenwriter. Not necessarily all the time. You know, a director will go through and change a lot of stuff. And sometimes the director really is the screenwriter. But should the director go in and just change the screenwriter's vision? It's tough because there are a lot of terrible screenwriters out there. If you are a good screenwriter, the answer should be no. The director should not change stuff. But unfortunately, the industry is so used to doing that, it's almost a given. My screenwriting, when I was trying to write for the Simpsons comics, and I was auditioning, and I was so used to that sort of mindset, when I pitched some Simpsons comic stories, I expected them just to rewrite it all or cut things. So they asked me for a 3-page story. I gave them a 9-page story, figuring, well, they'll just cut it down to 3. It turned out that was not the case at all at the Simpsons comics, and they were, oh, we really like this, and we're going to keep the whole 9 pages, which I was pleasantly surprised. You know, it's really tough because if you're a screenwriter and you have any kind of pushback against the director, you could find yourself very unemployed very quickly. Same thing with the producer. And a lot of times the producer will come to you and say, well, I have this idea for a screenplay, please write it. And then you write it and they go, this isn't what I wanted. And you're like, well, you asked me to write it and I wrote it the way I thought it should be written, and now you're yelling at me. So it's a very difficult job because there's also no power. If the producer and director decide you don't belong anywhere near the set. We're not going to talk to you again, and we're going to change everything. There's almost nothing you can do unless there's something in your contract that says otherwise. And that's extremely rare. There's been a handful of screenwriters with some amount of power in Hollywood. Joe Esterhazy was one example. There's been a handful of guys who've gotten really big paydays, and that was announced. But did they actually have any power? Well, Shane Black transitioned into a director, so now he has power in that, you know, he's a guy who can write the script. And Shane Black's a really good screenwriter. He really taught me, just looking at his scripts, how to get that shorthand in screenplays down in such a way that, you know, you're not even writing in full sentences. You're just writing in fragments and almost in sound bites to give more an impression of the scene rather than describing every little thing. Because unfortunately, one of the things I had to deal with early on when I was writing screenplays was transitioning out of prose writing into a screenplay format where producers would say, there's too much description. There's too much information, which again sounds weird. If you have a good screenwriter, if you have a good writer, you want him to give you a lot of details so you can put that in the movie. But producers and directors sometimes see that as being locked into something, and then they can't change things as easily. They often want this sort of flexibility to do different things. And unfortunately, they've taken that to the nth degree with a filmmaking technique known as scrapbooking, where they shoot multiple versions of the movie and then piece them together later in editing. I very much disagree with scrapbooking. So, what should the screenwriter be? Well, he should be the guy with the vision for the story. And he should be the guy who writes all the dialogue and the subtext and, you know, basically is controlling the story and the decisions that impact the story. The director should be the guy who creates the presentation for the story. And they should be in sync, right? So with the Pineys, my book series, it's comedy horror. So it should be scary at times, but ultimately it should be light and fun and funny like Ghostbusters, which I compare it to sometimes. If you have a director who's not on the same page and they look at the Pineys and say, oh, yeah, we'll make this more horror, there'll be a couple of laughs, but they'll be dark and evil, and it'll be bloody, and everything will be dreary. Yeah, I wouldn't like that. And unfortunately, the way the studio system is and the way money is in the industry, that could very well happen if I'm dead and buried. And this is why I've always advocated to give screenwriters more power. Not necessarily all the power, because obviously screenwriters have their limits, and many of them aren't very good. Part of the problem is, you've asked me in the comments section, how does one get training for a screenwriter? And part of the problem is, there is very little training. There are schools and film schools and whatnot, but most of them are grifts just to make money for guys who don't make enough money screenwriting. It's sad, but it's true. They're not completely useless, because once you learn the format, then you know enough to actually write a script. But will the script be good? That's a different question entirely. I can show you the format and how to write the format, but I can't show you how to write a good screenplay necessarily if you're a talentless idiot who has never read books or seen any good movies. I can't help you if you're a moron and have no talent. But I can get you there if you do have some talent. And the question is, in Hollywood and in studios and even at the low budget level, who has the talent and who do you trust? Because there are guys with talent who are completely unprofessional and you can't work with them, even though they're brilliant. You can't work with them. And then there are guys who are very professional, but they have very little or no talent, and their screenplays are bleh. And unfortunately, those guys tend to get all the work. So this is why you have to be professional. This is why you have to understand the industry. And it's almost not enough to be a good screenwriter. Well, I can tell you from experience, it really isn't enough to be a good screenwriter. You also have to be a good marketer. You have to be good at talking to people and having meetings and networking with people, all of which I'm not so great at. And this is how you get work. And it's a very specialized form of job, because the first thing that will usually get jettisoned in a low budget feature is the screenwriter, right? Because if you can hire a director who can write his own screenplays, what do you need a screenwriter for? The director already wrote it. If you can produce a movie that the actor wrote and is going to star in, well, what do you need a screenwriter for? That's the way a producer would look at it. Now, I would say, as a guy who's been screenwriting for many years, that might be true. Some actors are pretty good at writing screenplays. Some directors are pretty good at writing screenplays. In fact, there are people who have natural talent. So the kind of talent I'm talking about is kind of what I do. I see a movie in my head and describe it. I'm not particularly good at writing. I spell a lot of words wrong. You can hear me mispronounce words in my video. But over the years, I've gotten better at it. But really, all I've been doing all these years is seeing a movie in my head, editing it in my head over and over again until I get it into a form I like, and then writing it onto a series of paragraphs that, portray the story. Words is good. See, I'm not a good writer. But I am a good imagination guy. And if you're one of those imagination guys with that kind of natural talent, when you could see the movie in your head and you're just writing it down, then yeah, really you only need the format. But you could also be, again, that actor and that director. So it doesn't hurt to expand your skill set in the business. If you want to be a screenwriter and shape the story, my advice to you would be head towards directing, because you'll get to do everything, including make the decision who writes the screenplay. It's something that takes a bit of time, but directors have that time. They have enough downtime they could write a screenplay. And you need those skills anyway as a director to be able to tell a good screenplay. Unfortunately, there's very few people in the industry who are savvy enough to read a screenplay and know it's good just by reading it. Like, they have enough skills to pick a good screenplay, but they don't have the skills to write a screenplay, so they defer it to a screenwriter. Some of those people do exist. I met them, and they're awesome, and I wish I could find more of them, because then I would have very steady work. But they are few and far between. And in fact, I worked for a guy for years, and the day I showed him how to format a screenplay, that was the last we ever worked ever again. I realized he just didn't want to write the screenplays. But once I told him how to do it, he didn't pay me very much, arguably. He didn't need me anymore. He never called me again for a project. So that's kind of the dog-eat-dog world of filmmaking. But if you want to present yourself as a screenwriter and do this and specialize in it, you can. It's just a very tough road, and you have to really market yourself, and you have to do things outside of just screenplays, because your writing skill is what's important. What you have to bring to the table as a screenwriter is important, and that importance is in the writing. You have to be able to present things that nobody else can write. And once you've been doing it for years, you get to the point where that polish comes out. And a lot of times you'll be polishing screenplays. Some guys just hire you. Well, I have a screenplay, but it's a little rough. You go through it and sort of punch it up and fix it and smooth out all the edges. And that's also something that screenwriters do and can do. And despite all I've said negative to producers and directors in Hollywood, that is something they'll hire skilled guys to do, because they'll still get the screenwriting credit. You'll get some sort of consultant credit, unless you really, really tear the thing down and rewrite it from the ground up, which a lot of times they won't do, because their precious, precious ideas have to all stay inside the screenplay. So if you want to get into this business of screenwriting, just understand what a tough road ahead it is. You really should be writing a lot of screenplays, spec screenplays, to have ready as samples for any situation. Any situation. You need short screenplays, screenplays of various different genres. You need to be marketing yourself. You need to be getting out there. You need to be sometimes entering contests. I'm not big on contests. It costs a lot of money, and it just eats up a lot of time. I would say network as much as possible. You're better off, instead of entering film festivals and contests, going to them and networking with people and meeting people face to face. Because if you can meet an up-and-coming director who's serious about getting a film done and is willing to give you some money, not, the moon and the stars, but some money, you find filmmakers that hopefully are loyal enough to hire you for a while and keep you in their orbit on their way up. And ideally, screenwriters need to find directors willing to take a chance on them. And then once you get a few credits, you sort of move up the ladder, hopefully. It's taken me a lot of years to get enough credits that make any kind of sense. If I lived in LA more, that would have helped me. You really need to live in LA, possibly New York. But you need, either way, to be piped into the industry in some manner, so you have access to people that you can get your screenplays in front of. And that, again, is all very hard. So, but if you're already a director or a producer or an actor, you're already kind of in. And you're already working in that job, which does have a recognition in the industry, which does have a certain amount of power. It has their roles, but it does have power. And you can get in. The easiest way, of course, is to be a producer. If you have millions of dollars, you can be a screenwriter. But you can be anything you want, right? But in the industry, money talks. So if you're financing a movie and you wrote the crappiest screenplay in the world, congratulations. You're a screenwriter because you financed the movie. So if you don't have those millions of dollars and you're trying to do this on your skill, just understand there are many skills you need to develop in order to get... You had to overcome the industry's sort of disdain for the skill of screenwriting. They don't see it as a major factor. It is. I think it's probably the factor. I mean, I have a bunch of trailers up here. You look at these trailers, and I look at them all day long, and I can see movies that are good, and movies that usually aren't going to work, or are the same and very derivative, right? I was talking to a filmmaker the other day, and he said, you looked at my trailer, or you looked at my movie. I think I looked at his movie. And he said, there were a couple of scenes we couldn't shoot to resolve some of the story, and you picked that out without having seen those scenes that we shot. So that's a skill that takes a long time to develop. There are things that happen in Act 1, 2, and 3, and I said there should have been some more payoff here. And he said we did shoot those scenes, but for technical reasons they couldn't put them in, and they tried to resolve it in other ways. So that skill is very subtle. It's the difference between, say, a James Bond movie that's good and a James Bond movie that's bad. I would say Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig Casino Royale, is a good movie. I really liked that movie. I thought we were off to an exciting new start for Bond. But then you look at something like Quantum of Solace, I think that's the worst James Bond movie ever made. And the difference there is the script. The first one is based on an Ian Fleming novel, so I think that helped it a lot. The second one, I can't even tell you what it's really based on. I guess you'd say it's original, but God, it's I just hate it. It's the difference of writing, the difference between the original Blade Runner and the sequel. It's the writing. It's the writing, stupid, as they would say. So you have to develop your writing skills, and that skill translates into other mediums. And you will quickly find, I think, at least right now, the skill of writing tends to get more respect in books and other mediums than it does in the industry. I also write comics. Comics and the movie industry are kind of similar. Most guys in comics, they don't really consider hiring a writer because they think they can write a story themselves. Can they? Somewhat. I mean, most people who speak the English language think they can write a story, and to some extent they can, but can they write a good original story that's thought-provoking and entertaining? More often than not, no. They can sort of take baby steps towards it, and once in a while they stumble upon a good thing, and part of it's awesome, but a lot of times they can't provide the polish that a seasoned writer can do. So you need to develop your writing skills. Screenwriting can be one of those skills, but again, it's a thankless job that's barely recognized in this industry, and it should have more power. It should have almost as much power as the director and the producer. It should be a triumph of power when you make a movie. It should be the producer running the money, the director running the presentation and the organization of the staff, let's say, and the writer handling the vision of the story and its dialogue and its words. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan in the Sunbeam. Next up, I'm going to tell you how to get training as a screenwriter, and this one is definitely by request. So tune in for that. See you Saturday at Ostera Fair in Pensgrove, New Jersey, and see you Sunday in Whitesbog from 10 to 3 at the Craft and Book Fair. All right, next video.